The young waitress quietly wiped away a tear as she read the small note left by the limping customer. Every day she served countless faces at the roadside diner, hiding her own struggles. No one knew that 5 years ago she had lost everything in a devastating fire, left to rebuild her life at age 27. She never mentioned her past until that rainy Tuesday when the mysterious limping man walked in. It was a dreary October evening at Molly's Diner, a modest establishment on the outskirts of Burlington, Vermont. Rain tapped gently against the windows as the evening crowd thinned out. Sarah Jenkins, a 32-year-old waitress with chestnut hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, moved between tables with practiced efficiency. Despite her youth, her eyes carried a depth of experience beyond her years. The small silver pendant around her neck, her father's military dog tag, occasionally caught the light as she moved. Each morning, she would touch it and whisper, still standing, "Dad," before starting her shift. When the bell above the door chimed at 8:47 p.m., Sarah glanced up to see a man in his mid-60s limping heavily through the entrance. His clothes were clean but worn thin, and he clutched an old leather briefcase to his chest. Rain had soaked through his jacket, and his expression carried the weight of exhaustion. "Just a coffee, please," he said softly when Sarah approached, his eyes darting to the prices on the menu. His hands trembled slightly, not from age, but hunger. Sarah recognized the look. Without hesitation, she brought him a full plate of the day's special alongside his coffee. "Kitchen mistake," she lied with a gentle smile. "It'll just go to waste otherwise." The man's eyes welled with gratitude, but before he could thank her, the diner owner, Tom Blackwell, stormed over. "What do you think you're doing?" he snapped at Sarah. "We don't give handouts. That comes out of your paycheck." "I'm sorry, I didn't mean." The man began, attempting to return the untouched food. "No, keep it," Sarah insisted. "I can afford it." Tom glared at them both. "You pull this again and you're fired," he spat at Sarah. "We're running a business, not a charity." The few remaining customers pretended not to notice, suddenly fascinated by their meals or phones. Sarah stood her ground, chin raised slightly, absorbing the humiliation without complaint. "Eat," she whispered to the man once Tom retreated to his office. "Please." Word of Sarah's insubordination spread quickly among the staff. By the next morning, Tom had reduced her hours and assigned her to the slowest section of the diner. His nephew, Carl, a server who treated the job as a temporary annoyance, openly mocked her. "Better watch out giving freebies to bums," Carl smirked as they prepared for the morning rush. "You'll have every homeless person in town lining up." Maggie, the young hostess who usually bantered warmly with Sarah, now avoided eye contact, afraid of losing her own position by association. The kitchen staff, once happy to slip Sarah extra food for herself, now strictly measured her employee meal. In the staff room, Sarah sat alone during her break, scrolling through her phone to calculate how the reduced hours would affect her ability to pay next month's rent. 5 years after losing her home to fire, she had finally saved enough for a security deposit on a small apartment. Now, that fragile stability wavered. The limping man didn't return that day, but his absence felt like a shadow over Sarah. She wondered if he'd found another meal, if he had somewhere warm to sleep. When she dropped a glass during the afternoon lull, Tom seized the opportunity. "That's coming out of your check too," he announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Maybe think about that before you give away my inventory next time." Sarah's cheeks burned as she knelt to clean up the shards, her pride stinging sharper than any cut from the glass. Not a single coworker moved to help. That night, as Sarah locked up alone, another punishment from Tom, she paused by the booth where the limping man had sat. On the table was a simple business card he must have left behind: Lawrence Wilson, attorney at law, it read, with an address in downtown Burlington. She slipped it into her pocket without knowing why, a small memento of kindness in a bitter day. Walking to the bus stop in the dark, Sarah felt a heaviness that went beyond physical exhaustion. For the first time in 5 years, she wondered if it was time to simply give up. The following morning, Sarah arrived to find an unfamiliar car parked outside the diner, a sleek black sedan that looked jarringly out of place among the usual pickup trucks and modest family vehicles. Inside, seated at the counter nursing a coffee, was the limping man from 2 nights before. But he wasn't alone. Beside him sat a distinguished woman in her 50s, wearing a tailored suit, her posture commanding attention even in the humble setting of Molly's Diner. When Sarah entered, their conversation halted. "Miss Jenkins?" The limping man stood, extending his hand. Lawrence Wilson. I don't believe I thanked you for your kindness before. Before Sarah could respond, Tom emerged from the kitchen, his face flushing at the sight of the limping man. You can't harass my employees, he began, but the woman in the suit swiveled on her stool to face him. Tom Blackwell? I'm Margaret Chambers, State Bar Association Ethics Committee. Her voice carried the weight of authority without being raised. And I believe the only harassment occurring here is what you've subjected Ms. Jenkins to. The diner fell silent as Lawrence Wilson opened his briefcase and removed a folder. 15 years ago, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, I was a senior partner defending veterans' rights when I was involved in a car accident that left me with this permanent limp. I lost my practice, my reputation, eventually my home. Sarah stared, uncomprehending, as Lawrence continued. But that wasn't my first time in this town. During the wildfire of 2018, I was part of the disaster relief team. We evacuated 17 families, including a young woman and her father, Sarah and James Jenkins. Sarah's hand instinctively went to the dog tag pendant around her neck. Lawrence slid a weathered photograph across the counter, a younger version of himself in uniform standing beside a man in military fatigues and a teenage girl. Sarah recognized herself and her father immediately. I've spent years tracking down the families we helped, Lawrence explained. When I walked in and saw your name tag, then witnessed your kindness despite your own struggles, I knew I'd found another piece of my own history. Margaret Chambers opened her own folder. What I didn't expect to find was a pattern of labor violations, Mr. Blackwell. Unpaid overtime, illegal deductions from employee paychecks, harassment. Tom's face paled. You can't prove, actually. Came a voice from behind them. Carl stood there, smartphone in hand. I recorded yesterday everything you said about taking the broken glass out of her paycheck. And I've got the adjusted time cards too. You ungrateful little, Tom began, but stopped when he realized every customer and employee was watching. Lawrence placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder. I wasn't just any lawyer, Ms. Jenkins. I specialized in labor law before my accident. And it appears I've just found my way back to practice. Sarah stood speechless, the dog tag warm against her collarbone as the connection between past and present came into focus before her eyes. By noon, Molly's diner had transformed into an impromptu community center. Word spread rapidly through Burlington about the waitress who had shown kindness to a homeless man who turned out to be Lawrence Wilson, once the state's fiercest advocate for workers' rights and veterans. Local reporters squeezed into booths. Regular customers returned from their morning routines to witness the commotion. And, most surprisingly, 3 more attorneys arrived, former colleagues of Lawrence, eager to join what they were already calling Sarah's case. Tom Blackwell remained locked in his office, blinds drawn, occasionally visible through the slats as he paced and shouted into his phone. I've worked here 3 years, confessed Maggie, the young hostess. To a table of attorneys. Sarah trained everyone. She covered shifts when our children were sick. She never complained, even when Tom cut her healthcare last year. A burly truck driver who came every Thursday stood up to pay his bill. Instead of leaving, he placed $20 in a jar he'd labeled Sarah's Fund and set it by the register. Within an hour, the jar overflowed with bills, requiring a second, then a third container. For 5 years, you've been serving me breakfast, explained an elderly woman with tears in her eyes as she contributed. After my husband died, you were the only person who remembered how I like my tea. You think we didn't notice you? We noticed. The kitchen staff, emboldened by the day's events, revealed how Tom had been systematically shorting their paychecks for years while threatening deportation for those who dared complain. As the afternoon progressed, an unexpected visitor arrived, Michael Jenkins, Sarah's younger brother, who had been stationed overseas with the military. Sarah, he called above the crowd. When Sarah turned, her composure finally broke. They embraced as the diner erupted in applause. Lawrence tracked me down, Michael explained. Why didn't you tell me things were so bad? After the fire, after Dad, you said you were doing fine. I didn't want to worry you, Sarah whispered. You were serving our country. You had enough to worry about. Margaret Chambers approached with Lawrence limping beside her. Ms. Jenkins, we've documented 47 separate violations of labor law. The settlement value. She named a figure that made Sarah's knees buckle. But the diner. Sarah protested. All these people will lose their jobs. Actually, Lawrence interjected, I've made some calls. The property owner is willing to transfer the lease. With your settlement, you could become the owner if that interests you. Sarah shook her head. I'm just a waitress. No, came a chorus of voices, customers, co-workers, community members who'd arrived throughout the day. You're much more than that. Late that afternoon, Tom emerged from his office, defeat etched across his face. He approached Sarah with lawyers flanking both of them. The paperwork signed, Margaret announced. Effective immediately, Tom has agreed to sell his business interest to avoid criminal charges. I never thought. Tom began, but couldn't finish. Sarah, still wearing her waitress uniform, looked around at the community that had materialized to support her. I don't want revenge, she said quietly. I just wanted to be treated fairly. Lawrence smiled. And now you'll be treated as what you've always been, the heart of this place. As the sun set, Sarah found herself sitting in what was now her office. On the desk sat the nameplate Tom had kept for himself, manager. With gentle hands, she moved it aside and replaced it with a simple handwritten sign, everyone welcome. A small girl, no more than 6 years old, approached Sarah's table the following Sunday. The diner was packed with its usual weekend crowd, but something fundamental had shifted in the atmosphere. Laughter flowed more freely, staff moved with newfound purpose, a community board near the entrance displayed local needs and offerings. The child placed a carefully folded paper crane next to Sarah's coffee cup. My mommy says you're a hero, she whispered before scampering back to her family. Sometimes the most profound strength isn't found in those who shout the loudest, but in those who persevere when no one is watching. True dignity isn't measured by titles or possessions, but by how we treat others when we ourselves have almost nothing to give. In a small Vermont diner, now known throughout the state, a simple act of kindness rippled outward, revealing how deeply connected we all remain beneath the surface of our daily struggles. Sarah's story reminds us that we never truly know the battles others fight or the impact our smallest gestures can have.